Well, good morning, everybody. Greg Short, author of The $1 Billion Paperclip. I've been in market research for about 20 years, mainly in video games, which is a slightly different world to where you work in for some of you here, but very exciting in terms of what we've been doing. So, humans have something in common with a lot of other predatory animals, and our eyes look forward. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One reason is we're hunters. And when you're chasing things to throw spears at them, as cavemen used to do, you needed to have depth of vision, stereoscopic vision. There are some other animals that have that, lions, tigers, wolves, even some birds. They have something, though, that we don't have. Most animals have built-in defense mechanisms. They have better hearing than us, better senses of smell, whiskers to feel the wind moving. All humans have is a bigger brain. We're not really as skilled as a lot of the other animals out there to sort of be aware of what our surroundings are. So what we do is we have all these eyes and we look. Humans are very much designed to be seeking opportunities. We're all here today because we're seeking opportunities to innovate, to look for ways to grow our businesses or grow our clients' businesses. But there's a problem when you are constantly looking straight ahead. And that is, even if you look at the picture here, your eyes are drawn to the lines, but not so much the forest and what's going on around you. And that's kind of where research has ended up for most people today, is that we're all looking ahead, but we're not necessarily seeing everything else that's going on around us. It's kind of like when you're looking from a company perspective and you're thinking about what you're doing. We all know a lot about our own businesses very deeply. We have tons of internal information. But when we start asking, well, what are our competitors doing, or what's going on in that macro landscape, things start getting a little bit blurrier. I like to refer to it as corporate myopia, or short-sightedness. We're very, very able to see right here, but when we start to look a little bit out there, we need some glasses to help us get there. So how does this relate to paperclips, you might ask? Good question. So if you think about a paperclip, most of us would say it's a piece of, less than a penny aluminum that we can throw away when we're all done with it. But the reality is actually very, very different. Once upon a time, before that paperclip was a paperclip in your hands, someone had to go into a mine deep in the earth and extract all the metal they would use for that. It went to a smelting factory where they turned that raw material into metal. From there, it was shipped all over the world to wherever the manufacturing plant might have been, where it became a paperclip. Of course, paperclips that are in giant stacks everywhere aren't really very good to you until they actually get into a store. So that required someone to build a store and to hire people to work in the store and to order the paperclips, unless you ordered it online, in which case someone had to design a website and host the internet and be Al Gore and all those fun things. And of course, once it's in a store, we had to do research to figure out how we're going to market it to the store because people had to know it was going to be there, which requires a good brand. From the 80s, and you remember MacGyver, he was very good with the paperclip. And of course, finally, hopefully, someone pays you some money. So my concept of the $1 billion paperclip is a metaphor, and the metaphor is this. If a paperclip has an entire ecosystem that represents billions of dollars in the life cycle of that tiny little thing, imagine the contextual ecosystem that would exist for your business. Now, when we think of a paperclip, most of us would think, well, it's used for papers, but once again, consumers are ahead of us, and half the time, they're not using it for what we think. Maybe it's ejecting a SIM card from a phone, and they've actually designed a special paperclip just for doing that task now. So this goes to really the point that we don't really always understand, unless we're looking at the full big picture, where things are headed. And that's a theme for this entire 2 days of conference, is where is our markets headed, what are they doing, and how can we be aligned to that task? Now, I mentioned earlier that as a superior species at the top of the food chain, we have brains, and that helps us be more advanced. But the reality is actually not always true. The human mind is actually designed to do one very specific thing, amongst others, which is pattern development. So as we are exposed to things in life, we're constantly developing new contextual capabilities that enable us to predict the future, hopefully to prevent death. It's kind of a defense mechanism. So imagine if I was to flip a coin 100 times, and 100 times it came up heads. And I was to give each of you $1 million and say, I'm going to flip it again, and if it comes up with what you picked, I will pay you double that amount of money. How many of you would say heads? Raise your hands. How many of you would say tails? Raise your hands. Not many people raising hands. But that's okay, because you're not going to get any money now. The reality is our patterns in our brains will have already picked which one they think it is. Some of us, that pattern will say it's predictive, we're going to get another head, and some of them would say tails. So we would take that bet. Our brains are doing that all the time, and it doesn't always lead to the right conclusion. For example, let us imagine that I went walking through the forests of Amsterdam, and I picked bunches of berries, and I put those berries in the conference room or the networking room here, one at each end of the table, and they're both beautiful little bowls of blackberries. And at the end of the conference, half of you would be feeling quite unfortunate in the restroom, and the other half of you would feel great. You just had very nutritious elderberries. Now, if you had seen the plants that they had come from, you would actually perhaps know one was hemlock and one was elderberries. But if you did not, and all you saw was blackberries, how would you actually know what it was that you'd consumed? And this is the problem with data today. The majority of people who are actually making business decisions based on data do not understand the data that they're making decisions on. They look at a number on a report and they say, oh, it's sales, or it's marketing, or it's a survey. But if you ask them to start going to the next level deeper, tell me about the quota that was used in that survey. Tell me about the delivery method that sales data is actually delivered by. Tell me how many stores this is representative of. They trust us, that we know that information, market research professionals, that we've done all of that due diligence for them, so that they can look at the number and assume and trust that that bowl of berries is actually safe to eat. It's a huge amount of responsibility. And yet, the majority of companies in the world that I have interacted with do not audit their data. If I was to say, give me a registry of all of your data and information, tell me what data you have, tell me where it came from, tell me how it interacts with other data systems, despite efforts that are going on in data governance and master data management, that information never really gets out of the research departments and up to a digestible level where people can actually use it when they're making their decisions. So, how does this tie into the bigger picture? We are entering a new era. Predictive analytics is kind of on its way of evolution, I guess, to the next phase, which is what I call contextual analysis. We've heard content is king, and now context is king. But the reality is, if we don't know why data is related to other pieces of data, and if we can't start to understand how behavioral ties into consumption, how marketing plays into sales at a more broader perspective, if we don't understand each piece of information with its full context, we will start to make erroneous decisions, particularly as we start to lean on technology-driven predictive analytics to try and piece these pieces of information together. Consumers are actually getting way ahead of us. The traditional concept that I can model out how a price drop will impact a store or whatever, those days are done. I can pull up a smartphone and see exactly what price every single store in my local neighborhood is selling a product for and go to that store. And if I get there, it's the cheapest, I buy it. If I get there and it's now cheaper online, I may not buy it there. I might hit my Amazon purchase and just wait for it to get delivered at home. We're starting to get to a point where we need to be faster and faster and faster. We all know this. We're going to hear a lot over the next 2 days about the speed of change and how we need to understand programmatic targeted ads and retargeted ads and all this new developments around getting to the consumer the exact message at the right place at the right time. So I have a book, as I said, it's available in April, where I tried to explain how you can build systems that will help you do this based on stuff that I have actually developed and put into the market in the video game industry. So there's 5 key areas of data that you need to have in an ecosystem to create contextual analytics. At a high level, the supply chain. So this is all the data about how much it costs to make something, how many units you've got in the warehouse, how much you sold last week or yesterday. There's the discovery loop. Unlike supply chain and consumption chain where you start and end, the discovery loop is constant. Everything you do is teaching you something new about your next your next sort of purchasing habit or purchasing engagement. So all your marketing data, spend data, engagement data is going in there. And then the last one is consumption, which is how are they actually using those products. Now in packaged goods, that's still a little bit behind, but with the Internet of Things continuing to evolve, we're probably not that far away from one day being in a position where you swipe a barcode of the laundry detergent you're gonna put in your washing machine. It will automatically know the exact perfect settings of how to dispense that, report back to the mothership which detergent you used, how much you used, how frequently you used it, and we'll be aggregating data like that to do really cool things about optimizing something at some point. But these are the two pieces of data most people are missing. Identity. You all know the product codes of your own products, and maybe there's UPCs and EANs and GTINs that are out there, but as you start to go beyond that, and you start to think about how you're going to integrate the ingredients that are inside your box of cereal and how that compares to the current cost of corn that's being harvested, or all of these complex things, you'll start to realize that the identity systems break down very, very quickly. It makes it very difficult to traverse disparate data sets, which is the last piece that's the most missing piece, which is metadata. Now, we all are excited about metadata, and we find it very exciting, but the reality is product attribution information is very, very weak in most industries right now. At one of the companies that I founded, a company called EDAR, we have, over the last sort of 7 or 8 years, developed 150 million pieces of metadata just about video games. That allows us to bridge disparate brands and product in ways that are impossible to do without that level of granularity. So it's something that you need to be thinking about, is how are you going to create effective product attribution that allows you to actually go multi-vertical, full consumer lifecycle, and bring context into your analytics ecosystem. So we have 3 core people in sort of the audience today. So I wanted to talk very briefly about how you can think about yourself if you provide data, if you buy data, or if you make decisions around data, where I see this sort of future headed. So if you are a supplier of data, we're moving away from jack of all trades. The day of going to a company and buying everything you need from one vendor is kind of disappearing. We're seeing more and more boutique shops who are very highly specialized, starting to come up with very interesting, exciting new data sets, but they're very niche. The good news about that is they're higher quality. So that's very helpful, because quality is the most important part of where we're at. Now, it also means that in some cases they're more expensive, but hopefully you only have to buy them once because they're the best. One of the big changes we're moving to is what we call flexible delivery. So in the olden days, you would get a CSV or an EDI or something and you'd make that work. And now we're moving into real-time APIs and the ability for people to be able to give you data in ways that you can then consume any way you want. If you are delivering data in a proprietary format that requires a proprietary piece of software to read, you are a dinosaur. People will not be purchasing your data in 5 years. You have to be delivering data in ways that people can utilize effectively internally. If your data is so commoditized that by making it more accessible to your customers, you're afraid that it's going to go away, you have bigger problems. Your data's not good enough. You need to be thinking about how to make it richer. And that leads to integration, right? People want to be able to pick any technology vendor that's doing something cool and leverage the amount of money that they're spending on your information. So you have to allow them to do that. You have to find ways to be a partner to your customer and not just be thinking about your data system. So if you're buying data, how do you start to leverage some of those challenges? Well, the first thing that you want to do is you need to understand what you have. Do data audits. Know what you've got and know what your gaps are so that you're not buying duplicitous amounts of information. You're actually buying information that adds value to your total data ecosystem. You also need to make sure that you can embrace disparity, right? The days of a single data warehouse are dead. You need to be able to access multiple disparate data sets and bring that data together in real time to create new insights. The data is too big to move all of it into your own data warehouse. So you should be working very closely with your IT and technology teams to think about how to use disparate and fragmented information within your data ecosystem. I need a feedback thing here. I'm going to get a neck. You have to demand visibility. You need to be able to say to the people that you're buying data from, tell me how you're getting that data. Where is it sourced from? How reliable is that information? And they should be able to provide you those answers. You must be able to utilize context, and of course, you should be working on developing data ecosystems so that you're able to use enterprise feedback management, propensity systems, tie those into your targeting and your CRM, and to actually create all your data feeding back and enriching future data efforts. If you're doing one-offs and that data is not contributing to your total data pool, then you're to some degree wasting long-term revenue that you could be gaining if that data was actually reusable for future research efforts. Lastly, if you're actually the decision maker, you need to be able to make sure that your data not only looks back at what happened, but can use contextual systems to look forward. You need to also make sure that you can match your expertise with the data that you have in your system. Understand the inherent nature of your actual data. In other words, know what it means above and beyond just the limited data that's in there. Understand its contextual relevance. And lastly, that you can dive as deep as you need to on demand. Last slide, then you can kick me off, Ray. This is the animal that you want to be. You want to be a chameleon. They can look forward and back at the same time. They can adapt their skin to whatever environment they need. And when they hunt, they can be very precision targeted with what they're looking for. This is the animal we should be aspiring to when we think about our information systems. Thank you.